I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Toledo, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are going to craft yet another fantastic hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family and your coworkers and the birds and the bees and the worms and the trees and everyone and everything.
Because the thing called love.
Because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together here in this wonderful little planet called Earth. And we have a wonderful show for you today. We're just going to chat for the next 10 minutes or so. And then we have a guest calling in, Zach Hayes. He's a BGSU student, and he's one of the people organizing the BGSU's Earth Day event on April 16th. And we're we're coming up on Earth Day, April 22nd. My favorite holiday of the year, because literally it's the one holiday everyone can celebrate. It doesn't matter what your religion or your cultural background is. If you can't celebrate Earth, what can you celebrate?
If you live on Earth, you are eligible.
Right, yeah. I mean, maybe Elon Musk doesn't celebrate Earth Day because he's more into Mars, but
yeah,
as far as I know, he's the only one. Then we're going to, after we chat for a little bit and talk to Zach, we'll hear from our advertisers and patrons, wonderful people and businesses that help support our program. Then Rebecca, it'll be your turn, and what will you be talking about this week?
I will be talking about something with some personal meaning to me as a swamp dweller. Sinkholes.
Sinkholes, yeah, they're getting more important in the news.
I kind of have one under my driveway at this point, an incipient one. It's not good.
Yeah.
Landlords.
Right, and then it'll be ecological news from around the world. And then hopefully at some point, as we say, we'll hear from you at 877-909-1007. And to talk about any environmental or ecological topic that you like. It's really kind of open to people. And there's so many things to talk about with the environment that we're happy to give you that opportunity here on For a Green Future. So it is spring, the flowers are a-bursting and the bees are a-buzzing, at least some of them, we've seen them out and about pollinating the flowers, and the trees are budding and the leaves are coming really fast. And it's already down in the south, it's already like hot weather down there. I have a sister in North Carolina and she was like, it's really hot. So one thing that happens when it gets warm is actually it becomes protest season. And they had protests yesterday. I'm sure you've heard about them. But I'm also fairly sure that you didn't actually hear about the true scale of those protests. I was at the one in Bowling Green, and we had down there about 600 people, and that's in a city of 30,000. We had 600 people out in the streets. That's about 2% of the population. And it seems like that's what happened nationwide. Nationwide, about 2% of the people in the country were out in the streets. The mainstream media, okay, I've been watching the news reports, and the mainstream media has been saying, well, like Fox News said thousands, and then all the other ones, ABC and PBS and all those other things said tens of thousands. But the actual number is 5 million. There were 5 million people protesting yesterday all around the country in over 1,500 cities. And the way you get to that number, it's very simple. You just look at there, like I said, there were 1,500 cities, and there were thousands of cities like Bowling Green, smaller cities with hundreds or a few thousand people. And then the big cities like, Washington, D.C., the estimate was over 100,000. New York City, 100,000. Add those up, and you very quickly get to 5 million people. And it's really important to remember that so many people were out there for so many reasons. And of course, I was out there with my sign that had my sign said, keep your tiny grubby little hands off of the EPA.
I saw that. That was funny.
Yeah, and I had the little, I used my artistic abilities to the max and drew little baby hands like reaching towards the EPA. But there were a few out of those 5 million people. There were actually some arrests, but the only arrests that we know of nationwide of those 5 million people were from MAGA people who attacked protesters.
Sounds about right.
That happened about half a dozen times. It was like 5 or 6 people were arrested. They were all MAGA people who were attacking the peaceful protesters, and that's around the entire nation. I mean, could you imagine if you got 5 million people together for like any other purpose, like a football game, for example?
Basically, someone would win and goalposts would end up in weird places. I don't know.
Yeah, could you imagine such amazing nonviolent, that there were no fights, no altercations? It was incredible. Now, the main counter-protesting did seem to be guys in huge pickup trucks doing what they call rolling coal, which is when you have the modified muffler and you floor your car in such a way that it makes a huge, big, belching black smoke, and really obnoxious and really unhealthy. The guys who do this, a lot of them have asthma because you can't breathe in that stuff for very long without hurting your lungs. But that was it, And in Bowling Green, we had like 4 of those guys that they kept driving back and forth. But
so you could just sort of look at them and go, "Hey, get out of that truck and walk fast."
Yeah. So, but
You'll
it
be
was
doubled over in a couple seconds.
Yeah, but it was inspirational. I mean, it was really, really nice to hear that many people. And of course, the environment was one of the main reasons that a lot of people were out there, even though a lot of the signs, the signs had all kinds of issues on them, from, wages to, protecting people's rights to fair trials and things, due process and all kinds of signs. But everybody who saw my environmental signs were like, yes, I'm glad somebody's here for the environment. And one thing we do know, and I wanted to look back, we reported on this when it happened, but since we're talking about the Trump administration and their policies and people protesting them, here in Ohio, down in East Palestine, about 3 weeks ago, Trump's EPA director, Lee Zeldin, made a speech basically where he said that the EPA is getting out of the environmental protection business. And so I went back and I actually listened to that speech in light of these protests because
Well, the name still fits because they're protecting anyone's profits from the environment. So the environmental protection is.
protecting
I guess they
profits.
can
Yeah,
keep the name.
I don't know.
not change it to the profit protection.
The Profit
Agency.
Protection Agency,
Yeah, the
Environmental
PPA.
Profit
I don't
Protection.
know.
I don't know. But he, in this 2.5 minute speech, he laid out the stuff that they're getting rid of, and one is tailpipe emissions. So the coal rollers are celebrating in the streets by belching black smoke. Um, but they're also getting rid of standards for mercury. Okay.
Spiffy.
Yeah. And
Are these the same people who are all worried about mercury in vaccines?
oh yeah, no, you can't have it in vaccines, but you could breathe it in from coal plants because coal plants put out a bunch of mercury.
I know guys
Um,
from the north side who used to like play with mercury out of thermometers as children and carry it around in their pockets.
Yeah.
That's not a good idea,
No,
people.
kids, yeah, don't do that. Even though it's shiny and,
Yeah.
and like really cool to play with, don't do it. All right,
No, bad thing to do.
it's bad for you. They're also getting rid of the air toxic standards for thousands of other like chemicals in the air. Um, they're getting rid of regulating particulate matter. The soot that guys like those coal rollers put out in factories. And they also are getting rid of the whole tailpipe emissions, the miles per gallon fleet requirements for cars. The cars are required, manufacturers are required to have like a fleet average for the cars that they sell. So if they sell like a big old truck that gets 8 miles per gallon, they also need to sell, a little car that gets 30 miles per gallon. Well, they're getting rid of that so they can just do the really expensive gas guzzlers. And one other big thing is that they're getting rid of studying what's called the social cost of carbon. And the social costs of carbon are basically when you put something nasty in the air, like particulate matter, it causes people to get sick. They get things like asthma. And so what the EPA has been doing is calculating the social cost of treating people for lung diseases against how much money a corporation saves by getting to put this pollution into the air.
And let me remind you, we have a lot of people running around with lung damage from COVID.
Right. We got COVID.
So this is going to be great for them.
So they're more susceptible. And, we have all the refineries on the east side that have, over the decades, because of calculating things like the social cost of carbon, the regulations have been put in place that have largely cleaned up a lot of their emissions. And so people don't get sick as often over there. But now you get sick again because the EPA is getting out of that business. There's also something called the bad neighbors states. Those are states that put pollution in the air that makes the air in their neighboring states exceed air quality standards. And he basically said, we're going to partner with the bad neighbors against the good neighbors. We're going to take the side of the polluting states.
Okay.
And then finally, he called climate change a religion. He said, we're going to end the climate change religion. And it's to have the head of the Environmental Protection Agency call climate change, global warming, religion, as if it wasn't like real proven scientific fact. It kind of makes you wonder what religion he's, what's his denomination. If he really thinks that science is a religion, then who does he follow?
Yeah.
So these are all terrible, terrible things. And, so it was right. And environment is just one aspect of the terrible things that the administration's doing. And so I understand perfectly, well, partly because I was one of these people, but I understand why 5 million of us took the streets yesterday. And it was really heartwarming. It was really, I don't know if any of you have been to protests, but when you go in and it's such a huge protest that you hear like this roar of the crowds as you're walking towards it, I guess it's kind of like, going to a big sporting event, but it's even better. It's really.
Did people have a lot of purple lipstick like in Washington D.C. when we went?
There was a lot of colorful lipstick. There were all kinds of people.
'Cause I remember there was a lot of witch hats and purple lipstick, and it looked pretty cool.
I didn't see any witch hats this time, but I saw lots of colorful outfits, and it was great. And so that's making America great, I think, is Americans using their freedom of speech to demand things like a livable environment, which is perfectly reasonable. So yeah, overall, I kind of one last thing on Lee Zeldin's speech is it occurred to me that what they're trying to do is make America gray again.
Yeah, pretty
Because
much.
before all these regulations were put into place, if you look back in the 70s and 60s, all our major cities were just in a constant haze of smog,
True.
and you like really, there would be these rare days when a strong wind would clear stuff up, but most of the time, most of those places were gray, and so that's what Lee Zeldin's hoping for. So let's hope he gets stopped. Has our caller called in? Oh, well, this is a little concerning or worrisome, as they say. Let's go on to our next point then, and let's hear from our advertisers and patrons. So, For Green Futures brought to you by the Wood County Park District. So imagine a place where I have pulled my ad copy out before I started talking. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here, Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. until 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Or call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And For Green Futures also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they searched for Green Future. Up popped our amazing Patreon page. They scrolled through and looked for a membership level that matched their budget and signed up. So every month a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air, where we bring you information like the information that there were 5 million people. And I'd really be curious if anybody has heard that number on the news. Give us a call at 877-909-1007 and let us know, because what the mainstream coverage of this is just, like I say, thousands or tens of thousands. So we need programs like this one, because what we did was we went to one of the organizing organizations that actually did the adding up. And we were following it all through the day yesterday, because these protests, started on the East Coast and went to the West Coast as, the sun rose and it got warm. And it was the West Coast cities that put us over 5 million. But it was really intense to watch during the day as they were like, oh, it's hundreds of thousands. Oh, it's over 1 million. 2 billion, 3 billion. And then finally over 5 million people. So it was really inspiring. So let me know. Call us and let us know what you've been seeing on the news or in reports about this huge event that happened yesterday. All right. So that's our advertisers and patrons. And so, Rebecca, let's talk about sinkholes.
Okie dokie. Well, yeah. We live in a swamp, or at least on the edge of one. Joe lives full on in the swamp.
In Bowling Green, right?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, and our Toledo's baseball team minor league team is called the Mud Hens for a reason. It's muddy here.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, sinkholes are important to us. We what was it last week? We went and took a bunch of pictures of one that is actually a block away from where we are and as big as a car.
Yes, that's the famous sinkhole of Arlington Avenue.
Yeah, they're doing studies about what to do with it.
Yeah.
Apparently,
it's huge.
It sounds like it's not going there for anybody. Also, there's one that's trying to form due to the action of again woodchucks are a huge part of my life here in Northwest Ohio. Then they dug a burrow under the neighbor's driveway, which is right next to our driveway, meaning it kind of probably extends at this point to some degree under our driveway, and eventually the whole thing is going to fall in. But landlords, so actually two houses in our block have just emptied out because landlords won't fix anything, and our upstairs neighbor they got rid of them, so because they wouldn't fix the water. So yeah, it looks like we're just on track to have something terrible happen to our driveway, basically. So sinkholes, fairly major part of our lives here in Northwest Ohio, in the Great Black Swamp, as it was once called. So yeah, what is a sinkhole, you ask? Well, it's kind of in the name. It's a depression or hole in the ground caused by some form of collapse of the surface layer, also called a dolene. I hadn't heard that. It's kind of a fancy European sounding. And there are different terms for different kinds. An enclosed depression that does not apparently connect to any caves or aquifers is called a shake hole. The opening, I had trouble understanding this, but the surface opening where water enters the underground passage is called a panor or a swallow hole or a swallet. Surface opening.
Right, where it pours down into the ground.
Okay.
To make the hole. To make
something, yeah. And then there's also something called a. Oh my goodness. There's also a kind where something exposes groundwater underneath. Exposed to the groundwater underneath is a claret. I think something weird. I don't know.
Claret. Wow.
And then a sink or a stream sink are sites that drain surface water, usually by infiltration into sediment or crumbled rocks. So if it just kind of, the water disappears in a few days, it's probably a sink or a stream sink, assuming there's no sort of holes where something can drain very quickly. They're usually caused by karst processes. Karst being a type of limestone that collapses a lot, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a landscape where there's a lot of limestone, which collapses a lot, perhaps.
The limestone gets big cavities in it and holes, so the water can drain into that.
There you go. So they're caused by chemical dissolution of carbonate rock, collapse, or suffusion, with an O, suffusion, not suffusion, which is material washing into caves, basically. So some of the ecological benefits of sinkholes, according to St. John's River Management, is that these people at St. John's River Management Agency think that they're going to help, sinkholes are going to help them replenish the water supply in areas of that are dependent on aquifers, which apparently includes some parts of Florida. Don Lee, hydrologist for that agency, says the sinkhole is like a coffee filter, which is full of nice, clean, quality sand, which is true of some sinkholes and not of others. But they selected one which did have a lot of nice sand that the water could pass through. And in 2019, his team pumped over 20 million gallons of water into a sinkhole over several days from fallow agricultural land. I hope it was fallow because it didn't have a lot of chemicals on it for that reason. And some drawbacks would be that sometimes the stuff that goes down in sinkholes is contaminated with lots of pollutants. Like there's this incident in Florida where half of this development fell into sinkholes, and God knows what those people had in their houses. Yeah, asbestos, something. Yeah, you got agricultural crap going down there. Some occasionally entire plants which produce pollutants just fall into a sinkhole, or big parts of them do. Also, it disrupts the ecosystem and the water flow, destroys habitat for plants and animals, which affects biodiversity. And it can divert whole rivers and lakes and wetlands and lower the water table in general, meaning the plants on the surface don't have the water that they need. And your lake has just disappeared underground. And the fish are just kind of flopping around. And it can be accelerated by human activities, including construction, groundwater pumping, and also climate change, including like the rainfall and drought cycles that come with climate change can destabilize the ground, basically, and increase them. And for my zinger fact here, if you ever want to see the plus side of sinkholes, there's something called the Red Lake sinkhole in Croatia, which is the third largest in the world and is really, really gorgeous. I saw a picture. It's very nice. You should Google it. This is a big, huge, dark sapphire navy sinkhole almost and it's got all these sort of orange rock cliffs around it, and it looks gorgeous.
Huh. So sinkholes can grow up to be actual lakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or they can destroy lakes.
Or
It all depends.
Yeah. Huh. Cool. And I think it's worth noting that the kind of rain that we've been having this past week, where we get just these, amazing amounts of water, those can encourage sinkholes because, anywhere that water can find a little hole to get down into the ground with, it'll start pouring in, and all of a sudden you can have a big sinkhole there.
Yeah, a lot all at once is not what you want for many, many reasons, including sinkholes.
Yes. So, all right. Well, thanks, Rebecca, for that. And, we don't encourage...
Watch your step, people of Wood and/or Lucas County.
Yeah. We're not encouraging people to go, like touristy, go look at the Arlington sinkhole, but it is impressive. We took pictures, and I'll put some up on our YouTube version.
Yeah, my picture was just basically 20 million orange barrels, and you could sort of see the opening of the sinkhole because I didn't get out of the car. But it was an impressive amount of orange barrels, even for Ohio.
And often sinkholes are caused by leaks in our infrastructure. You'll have a sewage pipe with a leak, and that'll create a void underneath it, and then all of a sudden everything above it just falls into that void.
Plunk.
So.
Yeah, we're a Rust Belt city. We don't always get around to repairing our sewers fast enough.
All right. Well, it looks like Zach is a no-show, but I just really quickly wanted to go over the topic I had. The reason he was calling in is that he's one of the people organizing Bowling Green State University's Earth Fest on April 16th. And, of course, Earth Day is April 22nd. And I just wanted to sort of talk about the way different people and organizations kind of celebrate Earth Day. For example, on the 16th, BGSU is having its Earth Fest, and they're going to have all kinds of tables with different environmental organizations there. And they all have some sort of demonstration. So it's really kind of fascinating. We're going to be there. The Wood County Green Party is going to be there. And what we do every year, since this is outside the student union, is we generate hydrogen with using a solar panel. We put some, we put the wires into some water and generate hydrogen gas with it, which is kind of fascinating. There's also a lot of other things around the area, and I'm encouraging people to get out to, try to find something this April. Try to get out to an Earth Day thing. The Toledo Zoo on the 26th is having their Party for the Planet. That's 9 to 1. The University of Toledo is having a nice Earth Fest, April 17th, 10 to 3. And they also, in association with that, they're doing a lot of recycling. So you can show up there with hard-to-recycle things, and they'll take them. The 19th, Partners for Clean Streams is having a training session, and people are going to just go out to their local streams and rivers and just clean up trash. On April 27th, the Regional Multi-Faith Council is going to have a meeting at Holy Trinity Church, 2 to 6 p.m. That's 825 Glendale. Basically celebrating the earth. And as I said, this is the one celebration everybody could do, regardless of what their faith is or lack of faith. And our fair game, I have to say, one of our sponsors, Wood County Park District, is having their Earth Day Festival April 27th. That's going to be at the BG Montessori School on Sandridge Drive, 2 to 4 p.m. All kinds of tabling and all kinds of people there doing all kinds of stuff. So lots of opportunities to celebrate Earth Day, lots of fun things, and check the web. Just do a search for your area. The people, our listeners in other cities, there's tons of stuff everywhere. So it's kind of like the protests. There are people everywhere who care so much about the Earth that they organize these events, but the news about them just gets out in dribs and drabs. So go and hook up with people. They're fun. Okay, well, so I guess we're going to rush on to our ecological news segment. And our first story is actually a story I didn't have time for last week. And that's Michigan Live, M Live, on March 27th. The title is Oil Spill Outside Canadian Refinery Prompts Cleanup on St. Clair River. And basically, the St. Clair River is it's a river that's 40 miles long. It connects Lake Huron to Lake Erie. And they had a big oil spill there, 1,300 gallons of crude oil. It's from the Suncor refinery in Sarnia. And basically, like any oil spill, it's killing fish and it's doing nasty stuff. They put out a boom to try to catch the oil. Residents were warned not to touch the water. All the official sources say there's no illness or injury, but you can't dump 1,300 gallons of crude oil into a river and not have some environmental effect. I mean, that's just not how the world or pollution works. And it's just a reminder, this is comparatively small, oil spill compared to things like the Gulf oil spill that had billions of gallons of oil. But as long as we keep using oil, as long as we're on this carbon-based economy, we are going to continue to have oil spills.
It adds up. All the little ones add up.
Yes, and there are thousands of little ones every single year. This is happening all over the globe because we're so oil dependent, and we don't hear about the vast majority of them, of course, but they're just constantly happening. And so that's one of the big side benefits is, once we manage to get off of oil, and it has to come soon. There's still people, including our president, who are saying that we need to double down on oil. And in this situation where the globe is melting down, doubling down is not only impractical, it's probably the dumbest possible policy we could have. And so our next story actually is going to look at what some of the smartest people in the world are thinking about this. And it's it's kind of interesting because one thing that has happened is that the investment companies, the bankers, the people who sit around all the time looking at everything, trying to figure out where the smartest investments are going to be, have looked at the global warming situation and they have reached a conclusion. And this is a story in politicpro.com in their Climate Wire section, and they published this back on March 31st. The title is Big Banks Predict Catastrophic Warming with Profit Potential. So, yeah, you might be thinking, what kind of profit potential could there be? Well, what happened is these companies like Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan and a bunch of other international investment firms have looked at it, and they have reached the conclusion that not only is the world going to fail to meet the 2 degree, the 1.5 degree Celsius goal that the Paris Climate Accord set, but it's also going to exceed 3 degrees Celsius, which is just absolutely, devastating in terms of keeping our society functioning. That means huge crop losses. It means, massive heat waves. It means flooding. It means drought. It means all the terrible things that put a strain on our economy. So, but they, of course, are looking at this purely from the angle of how do we make a profit off of it. And so what they're recommending is that their customers invest in things like companies that make air conditioning units because we're going to need more air conditioning. 130, 140 degree days means people are running their air conditioners. And
how could this possibly all end badly?
yeah, it's like, nothing is so terrible we can't make money off it.
Yeah.
But of course, having air conditioners doesn't help much if the electrical grid crashes. So I'm sure they're also suggesting that people invest in things like home battery companies because more and more households are switching over to having a battery backup system that can run all their air conditioning and all their parts of their home. But all that stuff, all that resiliency stuff, that might help some people sometimes, but really none of it will work long term unless we stop the warming, because essentially what can happen is if we pass 3 degrees the way Morgan Stanley now thinks we will, that means the change will outstrip our ability to adapt to it. So we can't buy enough air conditioning units to save everybody if the temperature's getting up to 140 degrees in the middle of summer. So, but I thought that was kind of an interesting story. Next story, this is in The Guardian, and this is revisiting a story we've been reporting on. This was on March 28th, and it's written by a fellow named Stephen Donziger, who's an attorney. He's kind of a famous attorney. He actually went to prison for some years because he was defending indigenous tribes down in, and Chevron, who was essentially killing those indigenous people in order to take oil from their land, had him sent to prison, and he was there for a number of years. Now he's out, and he's doing things like he went to the situation in North Dakota where Greenpeace was being sued for $667 million. And his story was titled, "I was an independent observer in the Greenpeace trial. What I saw was shocking." And so this trial that we've reported on, that was totally kangaroo court, and Greenpeace was supposedly, it was dinged because supposedly they're the ones who organized the protest against the Dakota Access Pipeline called Standing Rock. And what he saw, and part of the problem with reporting on this is that the court prevented note-taking and didn't allow any kind of recording devices. And so it was very hard to report on it as it was happening. But some of the things he observed, because there was this little panel of independent lawyers who got to watch the thing, he saw that 7 out of the 11 jurors worked directly for the fossil fuel company. And in the pre-selection process, they were asked, can you be fair on a question that could affect the fossil fuel industry? And most of them said no. They said, no, I'm a member of the fossil fuel industry. I'm going to do what I can to protect the industry I work for. No, I can't be fair about those questions. But the judge let those people get seated anyway.
Okie dokie.
They basically admitted they could not be an impartial jury, but the judge said, that's fine.
Oh,
You
dear
can
Lord.
get on there anyway. And the judge also blocked any evidence that pipelines are in fact dangerous, or that they spill, or that they have leaks. And of course, the reason for this protest was that the Standing Rock tribe was and still is very worried that this pipeline could leak and destroy their water, destroy the river that they depend on for their livelihood. And that made this a pure freedom of speech event, that, you're having a protest to point out, if this pipe leaks, we will lose our river. He blocked any evidence of that supported that from being entered into the court. And so, if you can't make the defense that, hey, this is something that important that needs saying, because the judge has said you can't say that, it makes it very difficult to prove your case. Before the hearing, before the actual trial and before the juries were selected, Energy Transfer Partners, which is the corporation that sued Greenpeace, they flooded that area of North Dakota with ads on social media and the local papers and the local television, basically trying to make everybody prejudiced against Greenpeace before the trial happened. And apparently it worked. So there were only actually 6 people from the Greenpeace organization who actually came to Standing Rock. That's 6 people out of, there were roughly 100,000 people who protested, who were at that encampment at some point. And this, according to one of the other lawyers who's quoted in this article, a lawyer called Marty Garbus, he was the guy who represented Nelson Mandela in the South African court during the apartheid regime. And this guy said that this trial against Greenpeace was the most unfair trial he had ever witnessed. So just a little bit of an update on that story, because I think it's important we don't just let that one fade away. They are going to appeal, and so they're going to appeal to the North Dakota Supreme Court, and so we'll see what happens there. Okay, another story that we've reported on, but we're doing a follow-up story on. This was in DW, which is, I think that stands for Deutsche World. That's the German official, the German...
Deutsche Welt.
Deutsche Welt, thank you. Deutsche Welt. And this was back on March 29th. Title is Risks Posed by Hole in Protective Shell Over Chernobyl. And we reported before that Russia attacked the Chernobyl nuclear power plant with a drone. And what has happened, after Chernobyl melted down, they needed to protect the environment from all the intense radiation that's in the power plant. And so they covered the whole plant with what was called the sarcophagus, which was, at the time, it was the most cement ever used for anything. They literally just sort of encased this huge nuclear power plant in a concrete shell. Well, unfortunately, the radiation is so strong that concrete shell started falling apart, started crumbling, and so they built what was they then built the largest thing ever built by human beings, which is this tremendous shell that goes over the entire sarcophagus. And this thing, it was built, it's kind of a half cylinder, and it was built on rails because people couldn't build it right over the nuke plant because the nuke plant was too radioactive. They couldn't get that close. So they built this thing on rails, and then they slid it into position over the nuclear plant and sealed it up. And so then they took down the rail system. And now the problem is that once Russia shot a drone at it, and that drone blew a 160 square foot hole into it's called the New Safe Containment Structure, or NSC. So once they blew that hole in the NSC, it can't be repaired from the inside because the inside is too radioactive. And in addition to the 160 square foot hole, it turned out that it started a fire on the inside that burned for 3 weeks. And the firefighters had to drill 200 additional holes around it to try to get firefighting equipment in to try to extinguish this blaze. It took 12 years to build this thing, and it cost 1.5 billion euros. And the problem is that the old sarcophagus, the first shell around the nuclear plant, is now on the verge of collapse because there's beams, these steel beams that are holding the whole thing up, and several of those beams are on the verge of failing. And if it fails while there's still a hole in the NSC, then that super deadly radioactive dust inside the nuclear power plant is going to come pouring right out that hole and again create another wave of radioactive contamination. So this kind of points out the whole fallacy of containment. That the nuclear power promoters say, oh, we could deal with nuclear waste. All we got to do is put some concrete around it and bury it and we'll be fine. But what Chernobyl shows us is that there's no permanent solution. That this was supposed to last for hundreds of years, this NSC, and just a few years after it was finished, a war broke out and Russia blew a hole in it. We're planning to isolate these wastes for 200,000 years, and there's no way humans are going to leave something like that alone for that long. So there's an update from Chernobyl. Next story. On the heels of that, it turns out that Colorado has declared nuclear is clean energy. This is a story from Colorado Public Radio on April 1st, appropriately enough. Governor Polis signs bill. So there was a big coalition of environmentalists rightfully opposed to this. It declares that nuclear energy is what's called a clean energy resource. And the reason to do that is so that you can steal money from programs designed for truly clean energy like wind and solar. Republicans pushed this in 2023 and 2024, but what happened in Colorado in 2025 is the Dems picked it up and passed it. And basically, Democratic politicians are switching over to pro-nuclear as fast as Bill Gates can write checks. That's kind of what's happening all over the country, and it's really sad. And some of the objections in Colorado specifically were that it will take water, because water is a very big issue in Colorado, and these nuclear plants use literally billions and billions of gallons of water, and so they don't have the water to run nuclear plants. But that's not stopping Governor Polis from doing the evil thing and declaring nukes clean energy, the same way we are here in Ohio with our SB2 that declared nukes gas and coal. So we're still kind of up on Colorado in that. We also declared coal and gas clean energy, so they've just declared nukes energy. And one more nuclear story. This is from our friends at Beyond Nuclear. ASLB, that's the Atomic Safety Licensing Board, and they published this back on March 31st. ASLB rejects interveners' Palisades zombie nuke reactor restart and hearing request. So essentially what we have is the Palisades nuclear power plant over there in Michigan, and they're trying to restart it. They're wasting billions and billions of dollars to rebuild this falling apart old zombie nuke, as they're called. And a 3-judge panel rejected all of the environmental coalition group reasons for having a hearing on this. They had objected on the basis of health, safety, security, and environmental damage. The coalition is planning to appeal to the full nuclear regulatory commissioners. Part of the thing about all this is that the company that wants to do this, Holtec International, is a criminal organization. They have been convicted of bribery. They've been convicted just last year of lying to regulators about environmental issues, about the progress on some of their nuclear projects. So they've gotten penalties for lying to the government. They've been convicted of bribing officials. They are a crooked company, and what's happened is they're being given billions of dollars to do something that's never been done before, which is to try to restart a broken reactor, and it's just a huge scam. Basically, it's basically just really literally taking our tax dollars and giving it to this corrupt company, and that is not a good thing. Okay, well, let's see. That's about all the news I had prepared for today. So I just want to take a minute to talk about Earth Day and to encourage people to not just do something for Earth Day, but to really celebrate it. I actually have a party every year at my house. I invite all my friends and I invite my neighbors, and it's a great party. What we do is we have we ask people to bring stuff, and we tell them to bring an eco dish to pass, which that could be defined any way people want to. That could be organic or vegetarian or just homemade. We just ask people not to bring like a bag full of Big Macs or something like that. So it's a great time, and consider having an eco party, an Earth Day party yourself. Rebecca, I can't remember. Have you made it to any of my Earth Day parties?
I'm pretty sure I have at least once.
Yeah, and it's a great time, and having a great time is a part of the environmental movement that we kind of.
For one thing, there's a dog in Joe's house.
Oh yes, I have a very cute puppy named Ursula,
Mm-hmm.
little bear.
This is really, that and a couple books is all you really need for a good party.
Yeah. Yeah, and she behaves herself very well at these parties, I must say. So it's really a fun thing, and I also try to have every year. I try to.
She takes repeated flying leaps onto my lap.
Yeah, she could be very clear about wanting affection.
Yes.
This puppy of ours, and for a lot of people, their pet is kind of their connection to nature. You get home and a lot of people don't get out and watch the wild critters, but that little bit of wildness is there in every pet. It doesn't matter. Like dogs, they've been domesticated for tens of thousands of years, but they can revert back to wildness very quickly. I mean, that was one thing we learned at Chernobyl and Fukushima, where people had to abandon their pets because they were, their whole house was contaminated. They couldn't return. Very quickly, packs of wild dogs appeared and started, reassembling an ecosystem with them as the top predator. One of the most heartbreaking things about the HBO series about Chernobyl was they followed this soldier who's, in the early days, they were very concerned that the wild dogs would spread the contamination around. They would become radioactive and go outside the area. So they actually had soldiers going around shooting dogs.
Oh.
That was their job in the post Chernobyl quote unquote cleanup.
If they want to go after things that spread radiation, then we're all in trouble.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So yeah, so nuclear power is not good for anybody, not good for pets, not good for people. And as we like to point out on For a Green Future, part of the reason we created this program specifically and named it For a Green Future is that we don't need to keep using either nuclear or fossil fuel. We have wind, we have solar, and they are really taking off finally. And the rate they're taking off is accelerating. They're still not enough. They're still not fast enough. We need to switch over more and more, and that is happening in some places. So I still have hope we're going to make it, but we're bringing it right down to the wire, basically. And I had a little Facebook interaction with somebody, and I mentioned my electric car, the Wonder Van, which is my Chrysler plug-in Pacifica hybrid, and he just immediately did the knee-jerk reaction. Oh, so you're driving coal-powered car, because it used to be that coal was the main source of electricity for the United States of America. But one really heartening fact is in 2024, wind and solar produced more power, more electricity than coal did in the United States of America. Coal only did 15% of the electricity generated in 2024. Wind and solar together did 17%. So So no, I am not driving a coal-powered car. Coal only provided 15% of the nation's electricity. It's much more accurate to say I'm driving a wind and solar-powered car. And that trend is projected to increase substantially in 2025. Even though President Trump has made it, his goal to bring back fossil and to crush wind and solar, the market forces are just so strong because the fossil fuels are just so expensive in comparison, and they take so much more infrastructure. Wind and solar, like a wind plant, does have moving parts, okay, that could wear out, but it only needs the typical utility scale wind turbine only needs annual maintenance. So just once a year, you get up there and you add some grease to the bearings and do whatever, polish things and do whatever you need to keep the thing running. Whereas a coal plant or a natural gas plant need constant repair and maintenance, and they need people there 24/7 making sure they don't break down or blow up. So let's do it, folks. Get some solar panels on your house, celebrate Earth Day, and let's keep listening. We'll be back next week with an even better guest than this week.
Yeah, in the sense of actually showing up. Yeah,
exactly. All right, thanks, folks. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
We are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.